Hey there, this is Dr. Sage Breslin, and this is Wisdom Wednesdays on the move. I'm actually going to try to stop jiggling and walking, but right now I desperately need the walk, so I'm taking you with me. What I wanted to address today is sort of, to me, an intriguing subject. It's, how I think of it is probably the continuum of unhealthy attachment management, right? So many of us have been in unhealthy relationships, both personally and professionally. It's not just about, attachments we may have had as children or in love relationships, but also in work relationships, whether or not we're an employee or employer. So, when I think about it, there are like the healthiest ways, right? We manage relationships, good, clean communication and addressing things on the fly or in real time rather than, accumulating them and, then having an issue that becomes a bigger issue, right? Mountain out of a molehill. And then there are the less healthy ways, right? So when you have a truly unhealthy relationship, like a violent relationship, and you stay in it for a while, you develop a certain attachment to the other person that begins to alter how you see yourself and how you are. It alters who you are functionally. And I've talked about this before in light of things like Stockholm Syndrome, right? Where you accept a reality that is not your own and you lose yourself in the relationship. You find yourself believing in what they believe. You believe their story. And through gaslighting, it may be you believe that you aren't good, or you're the problem, or you're not capable of taking care of yourself, and so you have to be dependent on them, or whatever it may be. So if you imagine that you're in that situation and something happens, some big event that alters your vision in the moment, right? Brings you some clarity. Oftentimes, in unhealthy marriages or violent marriages, it's that the other party does something to the children, and mom's eyes, become wide open, and there's a reason to go, right? That becomes the way that people leave. So, we like to think that is a more rare circumstance. It's not, unfortunately, guys. It's more common than you'd think. But let's talk about, the kinds of relationships that are unhealthy that we come across, every day, that may even describe our own relationships. And something big happens. Maybe there's a health crisis, or you have a particularly big argument, or somebody drops the ball on something really important. There is the urge to flee, right? Which isn't always the best thing, right? If your urge to flee pops off about something small and you throw away a relationship instead of sitting down, having a conversation, resolving things, okay, then that's not the healthiest way to deal with it. But then think about the other side of things. What's maybe one, next step down is maybe not managing, or just sort of setting things aside, making excuses, keeping a blind eye to things. And, I guess then there are a whole other host of ways that we try to manage. We take it on ourselves. We make excuses for the other person that maybe aren't warranted. Okay, I'm going to stop jiggling because now I'm at the park and I might actually be able to just have some peace. I really needed to ground. So it's what's been on my mind. And I'll maybe give you an explanation that helps clarify, what I've been thinking about. So recently, I had very recently, that's why I had to kind of ground and walk off my extra energy. I had a colleague who called me emergently and was having a problem at home. And, the relationship isn't a particularly healthy one that she's in. It's got a long history of really massive ups and downs. And I think on most days she knows that this is not a healthy relationship for her to remain in. She doesn't quite have the level of wannarun I have. That's the name that I put to that part of me that wants to flee when things are really bad, which I pretty much retired my sneakers. So I still get it every once in a while, but my wannarun is retired. So she doesn't really have that, but she does occasionally have these insights about, okay, this is really not good. I really need to, be separate, go my separate ways. And then there are times she sees it with more clarity, but there's fear that gets in the way. And the fear puts her into this level of attachment with her partner that isn't healthy either. So she gets into this space where she feels like it's her job to be the one to make it all work. And it's her job to enable the dependency. And it's her job to make everything right, which doesn't help him either. And then when things really go upside down, at the far end of that continuum, she goes deep into syndrome. And she's part of the problem. And, that's what I was trying to keep in my mind today, was to assess, where is she on this continuum today? What can I do to help? Is there anything that I can do to help? At what point in time do I just keep on feeding back the information? Okay, you've got your tennis shoes on, you're acknowledging that this isn't healthy and you need to begin to separate in a good, healthy, and loving way. When do I assess that, okay, there is an issue where she's feeding in that dependency, and I maybe suggest, hey, what would happen if you let him take care of this? And gain more autonomy, and feel more like an adult. And when do I grab hold of her and say, you're in syndrome. You are not in your own reality. You're fully embracing his reality, and this is not your truth. And sometimes that's a really hard job. It's not that it's difficult to see where she is or anyone is along that continuum. It's a really hard job to be a friend and do that. It's a hard job to do it as a therapist and as a coach, but as a friend, to be loving and kind but firm, to not, get enmeshed into the unhealthy attachment as well. It's like a delusion. I remember when I was early on in my graduate school, I had this great supervisor, and she said, okay, here is, tip 101 for dealing with psychotic people, because she dealt with a lot of schizophrenic and psychotic people. And she said, just don't ever buy into the delusion. Now, that just sounds like, oh, that's so easy, right? But I had a new client come in, and she was telling me this whole story, and it's pretty believable, honestly. And then she got to a turn in the story where I realized, oh, this is all delusional material. None of this happened. This is like all in her mind. And I thought, well, how am I going to develop rapport with her? How am I going to have empathy? How am I going to show compassion if I simply, take this position that, well, that's all delusional, that's not real, all you have to do is just get over it, like that's not happening. Okay, I would never say it that way. I realized it was a little bit more challenging than it sounds, right? And the same is true for when we are in situations where there is unhealthy attachment. Think of, let's say you're a leader and you have an employee or a staff member on your team, and this staff member can sometimes be challenging to work with, and maybe his or her moods go up and down, and so you have to kind of give a little space, a little grace for all of that. But time and time again, this staff member is great when he or she is great, has knocked it out of the park on lots of occasions, but then over time, maybe in more recent times, drops the ball over and over and over again. And, maybe you do your review, that person goes on report, has a performance protocol to follow, but doesn't. And, really for all intents and purposes, you're thinking like, okay, it's time to fire this person. But something in you is just feeling like, wow, this person just went through a divorce and they have kids, and, one of the kids is sick, and right? Now you're involved in the unhealthy attachment. You're not following the protocol. Yes, you're being desperately compassionate. But is it good for your company? Is it good for your team? Is it good for other people to see that you're accepting less than is deserved and less than the team deserves just because you want to be a nice guy or a nice gal? Okay, so I'm not being a hard ass here. I'm trying to point out that all of us can buy into these unhealthy attachments at a lot of different levels. And sometimes we do it unconsciously, and sometimes we do it consciously and intentionally. So my wisdom for the day is, number one, if you're managing things like this, make sure that you do your self-care. We just walked to the park and are sitting quietly away from the office and away from the computer with the do not disturb button on the phone, because that's what I needed. I needed to walk off the energy. I needed some, just to kind of clear myself, my energy, my mind, to let my emotions be whatever they are. And you need to make sure that whatever decisions you make come from a place of clarity. And lots of times we don't do that. We make decisions on the fly rather than making them in the clear, energetic space of groundedness and mindfulness. So I wish you all the best in wherever you are. Hoping that your attachments are healthy and glorious for you. But if you find yourself in some unhealthy attachments, please feel free to give me a call or DM me.